Hello guys, how are you doing? I hope you're doing really well, staying healthy and trying to get things done. I know that there are lots of extra homework and it is really hard to stay at home and not being able to go to places and see people that you like to see, but everything has an end. And although I miss seeing people, especially you guys, so much, I'm trying to do a lot of art now that I'm at home. And today I'm going to share with you guys a little bit of figure drawing basics. Many of you have already learned this, but there are some people who haven't seen anything like this. So I'm going to take advantage of this time to leave something taped. Well, everybody has different methods of drawing human figure, and what's really important is that you find the things that you are good at using in terms of shapes and steps and the approaches. I'm going to share with you what I do usually and trying to show you guys different options to draw a human figure, because it is one of the most hardest things to draw. I still struggle with certain poses, but if you keep trying and practicing, it's always gonna get better. So we're going to talk first about spine, because the type of figure drawing that I'm going to teach you guys is what we call gesture drawing. Gesture drawing shows the essence of a given pose. So what's important is the movement, but also there are certain things that you have to worry about in terms of proportion and balance, the weight distribution, and etc. So the spine, because our body is symmetrical, it always decides what the pose is going to do and whether the person can hold that pose or not. Where the spine is what we call torso, the chest, the rib cage, and the pelvis. Yeah. So rib cage and pelvis is the core of our body, and everything else is basically attached to this torso. So we need to understand what the torso does so that we can attach the extra things really well. I don't always take this step, but today I'm going to just begin with the torso and then attach the rest. The pose that I'm going to choose right now is a straight pose, a person just standing straight, maybe doing a little different things with the arms, but just a straight standing pose is what I'm going to begin with. Now I'm using vine charcoal. It's just a piece of vine that is burnt. And the great thing about this material is that you can use a smaller piece like this, and then you can grab it like this, as if you're pinching it, and you can use the nature of the straightness of this material so that you can create straight lines without having to really control your hand like when you use the point of your material. So that's what I did for my spine. Now, looking at the size of the spine, I may have to make it a little shorter. So when I do my shoulder, I'm going to just use this extra length of my first line so that I can use it for the neck. Now I have to make sure that each side has the same length, same width from my center line, which represents the spine. And from here, the first shape that I draw, or actually this first line and the shape that goes with the width of this line, will decide the size of my drawing. So like I said, the width of this, which is the shoulder, right now we have it straight. Sorry. We're going to draw a ellipse, a fat ellipse rather, that is more or less the width of the shoulder. Now it is just a little bit longer than a perfect circle. There are different ways to do it. You can do it like this, or you can draw a bell shape. And the bell shape also is going to be just a little bit longer than half a sphere. yeah? For sphere, it would look something like this, right? So it's just a longer than half sphere. Now what does it represent? My first ellipse shape represents all this because there's a curve going down like this. My bell shape represents this. So there's this two options. Another option that you can use after drawing the center line and the shoulder is a long ellipse. Now what is the difference here? Now I want you to notice that there's a little space between the rib cage and the pelvis. I think I kept saying pelvis for rib cage. Anyway, rib cage and pelvis, there's a little space. This space allows the body to do a little tilting of the upper body, yeah? Because there's this space, empty space, without any bone, you can do this. You can fold your body like this. Now if you did the bell shape, same thing, since this is almost as long as this, you have to leave the space. Now if you start with a long ellipse like that, then you can put your pelvis right underneath that long ellipse shape. Another option is to use a triangle and then something else. It can be something like this. It can be like a bikini thing or it can be a mini skirt like this, which works really well for women because we have a little bit wider pelvis. Now the width of these things, of course, depending on the person, is different, but more or less the same width is always the safe way to go for me. Okay, so after that, oh, I kind of forgot to mention that I am assuming that this person has straight horizontal pelvis as well, since this is just straight standing pose with equal weight distribution at the left and right side, okay? So I didn't draw these lines, but that's what I was thinking, okay? After that, we're basically done. Everything else is just attached to this torso area. So remember that I left a little bit of the first line for the neck, so I give myself a little space for the neck. It also depends on the person, so it's a little longer, a little shorter. Just you should just make it look like it could exist. Okay. Now the face, the head, the size of it is more or less 2/3 of my first fat ellipse shape, yeah? So more or less this side. So that's what I'm gonna do more or less. You can put a straight head like that, or you can begin with a little bit of tilt so that it's a little bit more interesting to you. And this is a nice little oval shape, but right now I have it like an ellipse, which is fine. We can refine that later on, especially for gesture drawing. Sometimes you don't even have time to do really nice shapes. Now, shoulder. It is a little bit wider. Of course, there are wider shoulders, but it doesn't really go narrower than the width of the rib cage, okay? One good way to do it is to draw a little perfect triangle here, and that kind of represents a bone here. You can kind of imagine that you're drawing this bone at the back. Okay. And that is more or less where the shoulder should be. And we're going to just attach some lines, preferably coming out somewhere around the middle of the triangle because we're trying to represent the bone. But if you accidentally put it somewhere around here or something, it is okay because you can use that line later just to express this. So whatever that comes out at the beginning does not really matter. Now I'm going to use the straightness of my material again, and this time I'm going to bring it straight down, and I'm gonna stop right here, which is more or less the waist area, because our elbow is usually in the waist area, especially for women because we have high waist compared to the guys. I'm gonna stop there, I'm going to continue my line so that it's more or less the same size, stop there, and then I'm going to maybe draw a line that is half of the length of the forearm, because when you're drawing hands and feet, if they're too small, it looks kind of awkward. So just make them a little bit bigger than you imagine. Okay. Well, just to make it interesting, I'm going to make this arm go like this, and I can more or less eyeball it or measure it so that it's the same length as this, which is pretty accurate because we left it to be lining up with the waist. My cat did something wrong, so I had to, so I looked. Okay, so the hand. So there it is, arms. Now the legs. Everybody has different lengths. Some have them really long, some short. So it doesn't really matter how long they are. But longer is aesthetically more pleasing. So coming out of here more or less, I want you to notice that the bones come out of here. So straight down. If I really want to, I can do this, stop and stop. But I'm not going to do it this time. I'm just going to mark my knees and my ankle and bottom of the feet, so that it just looks pleasing to me. I stopped where I wanted to stop, because individual beings have different proportions. But just longer is a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, so that's what I try to do. Okay. Now in fine arts, we try to use 7.5 heads measure. But in fashion, it can be more than that, 8, 9, 10. It really does not matter because it's the artist's style, the designer's style. But just to show you guys where each head marks throughout the body. Okay, there's the head, right? Head. And then the second mark is usually the nipples. And then the third one, navel. Okay, your belly button. And then the next one kind of lines up in the crotch area. The next one is just a little above the knee. The next one is just below the knee, or actually a little bit like in the middle of your leg, right? And then the last one would be your ankles, and your feet is the half. So 7.5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and half. Okay? Now that's the straight pose. Nothing to it, right? Pretty easy. Now the next one is going to be really similar, but it's going to have a counterweight. We call it contrappesto. So straight torso, shoulder is also straight. But this time the weight distribution left and right is going to be different. So you're kind of doing this. So one leg is kind of comfortably folded and the other leg is straight. And the pelvis, I don't know if the camera can catch it, but the pelvis is not horizontal anymore. It's tilted towards one side. So that, and I'm going to make this drawing so that the shoulders are this width. I'm going to draw my little ellipse shape, and I'm going to draw the angle that this pose is making, which is one side of the pelvis up, the other side down. And I'm going to mark so that the pelvis does not get way too long or short, more or less the same width. And I think this time I'm going to draw my mini skirt so that I can show you guys how to use this. Now, always the higher side of the pelvis is where the straight leg is. And then the lower side is where the folded leg is. Maybe like this? Yeah? Okay. Now Now I'm gonna put the head like this, tilted. One arm is going to be doing this. The other arm is maybe going to do this. So something like this, okay? Now, I'm going to connect the lines so that I get the shapes at least. Maybe not the volume, but the shape. I'm realizing that my shoulder this side was a little too far out. That's why I made my arm going to this point, not to this point. And I'm realizing that I did not mark the line for this arm where the bone should be, more like an outline. So I'm just to go with it like this. I did my arm first because it's the first thing that stood out to me as something that I had to correct. And now the body. Always connect from the widest point of one shape to the widest point of the other shape. Here I'm coming from here, the widest point of this ellipse, and I'm just gonna connect here. On the other side, because of the pose, this side is going to be stretched, so you're not going to see so much of the curve of the waist going in, and you see more of that on this side. So that's created automatically because of this miniskirt shape. Let's say that I had my ellipse shape and then I had my other ellipse shape for my pelvis here. Then what I had to do was to go here, and then I had to decide kind of where to create that curve in two movements, because I'm going from here and to this, but I know that there's a little volume in this empty area, which is the flesh, so I could not do something like that, obviously. So I had to observe, and if I had a model, decide where to do my turn. Now if I have my miniskirt shape, the top of the pelvis and this side of the outline is already there. So all I have to do is just bring down this line and everything else is taken care of. Okay, I like to do each side of every segment of the body so that I can make something a little bit more coherent. So now that I did this side, I'm going to do this side of the torso. Now this arm, I think, should also be, this line should also be the outline. Just looking at the proportion, that would be more natural. So I'm going to do this, and I have to make the correction here. And I'm creating this diamond shape because that's really a great shape for the elbow. Anything that's bony should be angular looking. Anything that's kind of fatty should be round looking. Okay, now the rest, I'm just gonna mark my knees using a circle because that's just more or less what a knee looks like. From here, all I have to do is to go towards the widest point of my knees, 1, 2, then 1, 2. This leg looks like it's kind of turned to the side like this, so I'm going to use that circle to make the mark for the knee, and then the legs. Okay, I have to mark the ankles too before I start doing the legs. Well, when you do the legs, there are different ways to create that curve. One way is to do something angular like what I'm doing right now. Just in 2 movements, 1 and 2 towards the ankle, and 1 and 2 towards the ankle. This side, the pointy characteristic is not so prominent because it is a little bit turned away and is a little straighter. Depending on the angle of the pose, it really differs. Here, the leg is turned away, so I can see more of that muscle from the inside, and this should be pretty straight because it's turned. Now the feet. This is one of the hardest things to draw, but if it's turned to the sideways, it's pretty easy, right? back of the ankle and create some sort of triangle to represent the rest of the feet. If you want to show a little bit of the toe, you can do the triangle and then do something like this to show the toe a little bit. Now, if it's turned towards you, it looks really challenging, but to make it simpler, just make your triangle not so pointy, and then draw a little ellipse shape like this to represent the toes that you can see from the front. So there we go. I have no idea what this looks like because I've been looking at it sideways, but that's basically the basic way to begin a human figure drawing, going towards gesture drawing. I know that it's not as quick as what you're gonna have to deal with in art college. Sometimes we have to finish one figure drawing in 10 seconds, and that's not gonna cut it. But I want you guys to learn a constructive way of drawing human figures so that you understand each body part in a simplified way, and then later on be able to visualize it in three-dimensional form, and then understand what you're looking at and being able to draw them so that it makes sense, that it is not just something flat. Okay, so that's the basic human figure drawing. Straight standing pose and contrapposto. I want you to get used to the proportions and those shapes that I showed you. One really common mistake that I've seen, short legs or really long arms or really tiny head. That's what I've seen mostly. So try to get used to those proportions, the proportional relationships between the rib cage and pelvis. Now, many times you perform better using one shape than the other. So find your favorite shape. Whatever works for you is the answer. Okay? So practice, take some photos and send them to me so that I can critique them and give you more personalized tips. Okay? Well, have fun. Take care. Stay healthy. Bye.